like the WNBA has become the laughingstock of all sports, man, because the ticket prices are horrendous. This is a championship game.
What if I told you that the most successful season in WNBA history was ending with a championship that nobody wanted to watch? That the biggest games of the year had tickets selling for less than the price of a pizza? This isn't speculation. This is exactly what happened during the WNBA Finals, where the get-in price for Game 1 was just $23. While the league spent all season boasting about record viewership and historic growth, their championship tickets were practically being given away. And the reason behind this collapse reveals an uncomfortable truth about the state of women's professional basketball that goes far beyond what happens on the court.
Will debut the Las Vegas Aces versus the Phoenix Mercury, and I'm telling you right now, this is probably going to be one of the lowest rated WNBA finals.
If you think you know the whole story about this season, think again, because what we're about to uncover will change how you see the entire league. And before we dive deeper, if you're finding this perspective valuable, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more unfiltered sports analysis. The numbers don't lie, and they paint a devastating picture for what was supposed to be a triumphant final series. Imagine the Las Vegas Aces, led by MVP Aya Wilson, facing off against the Phoenix Mercury in what should have been the hottest ticket in town. Instead, nosebleed seats were going for a measly $30. The lower bowl, just $45. Want to sit right behind the bench? That would set you back only $90. These aren't reseller prices from desperate season ticket holders. These were the official face values from platforms like SeatGeek and Ticketmaster, meaning the league itself couldn't convince fans that these games were worth more than the price of a movie ticket with popcorn.
We know the controversy that led up to this game is pretty much attached to Caitlin's name. That is the Las Vegas Aces actually knocking off Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. Well, Caitlin did not play, but we know the referees kind of had a hand in that, we should say, with kind of making sure the Las Vegas Aces was pushed to making it to the finals. Not to mention, we got none other than Dewana Bonner, former Indiana Fever, quit the team herself in the talk and conversation of this WNBA Finals, and more importantly, her significant other, Alyssa Thomas, has found herself in some hot water as well, with not really speaking about the current.
For context, parking at most Vegas venues costs more than what they were charging for actual finals tickets. Compare this to last year's finals, where courtside seats commanded $2,000 and behind the basket positions went for around $800. This year, those same premium experiences were available for under $1,000, with many sections hovering around the $800 mark. The only areas even close to selling out were directly behind the baskets, but even those had significant gaps in the seating charts that fans were posting online, sarcastically calling it the most accessible finals in history. But the price tags were only part of the story. The visual evidence was even more damning. Social media feeds became galleries of embarrassment, filled with screenshots from official ticket apps, showing vast seas of unsold blue dots representing empty seats. Hours before tip-off, you could still secure hundreds of tickets in virtually every section of the arena. This wasn't a last-minute rush situation. It was a systemic failure of demand. The atmosphere inside the stadium often felt more like a pre-season exhibition than a championship deciding game. The energy was flat, the crowd shots on broadcast were awkward, and the silence between plays was deafening. When you compare this to the electric environments of the NBA Finals, or even a packed college basketball games, the difference is staggering. It raises an uncomfortable question. If the product on the court is supposedly an all-time high in terms of talent and competition, why does this premier event feel so inconsequential?
And that is the WNBA ticket prices. Yes, you guys heard me correctly. The ticket prices. So Legion Hoops, they made it their business to tweet about this. Now, I find this to be quite funny, me personally, bro. It says tickets for Game 1 for the WNBA Final between the Aces and Mercury are starting at...
The league can tout all the record-breaking regular season metrics it wants, but the empty chairs and plummeting prices during the finals tell a far more powerful and truthful story about the league's actual cultural footprint and the fragile nature of its recent growth. So what exactly caused this catastrophic drop in perceived value during what was supposedly the WNBA's breakthrough season? The answer lies in what analysts have dubbed the Caitlin Clark effect. When Clark was playing for the Indiana Fever earlier in the season, tickets were selling out within hours. Resale prices for Fever games back in May rarely dropped below $200, and the energy surrounding her appearances felt like a national event. Reporters swarmed the venues, fans lined up for blocks, and every game she played became must-see television. The viewership numbers tell the same story. Games featuring Caitlin Clark averaged 1.184 million viewers, while all other WNBA games managed only 428,000 viewers. To put that in perspective, viewership for games at the same time last year was just 301,000. Clark wasn't just another player. She was the main attraction, bringing in entirely new audiences who had never previously engaged with the WNBA. Then came the injury that sidelined her from the playoffs, and the bottom fell out of the market almost overnight.
BP, Asia Wilson can't even get tickets up to $50. Bruh, this is bad. I mean, this is beyond bad. This just tells you the state of this damn league. And I'm here to tell you, this is hella funny. It says the most unwatchable basketball product possible between the two teams left standing. Not to decimate it by injury, Kathy Ebert really outdid it.
A post on X revealed the staggering difference. Ticket prices plummeted from $41 per game to merely $3 per game once Clark was no longer playing. One sports lover even reported getting his tickets canceled because he lost interest in attending games without her presence on the court. This phenomenon highlights a critical vulnerability for the league: its reliance on a single transcendent star. Clark's impact wasn't just statistical, it was cultural. She brought a level of mainstream buzz and media attention that the league had never consistently enjoyed. Casual sports fans who could name 5 other WNBA players knew who Caitlin Clark was. She was the storyline. Her deep three-pointers and flashy passes became viral highlights, pulling viewers from outside the traditional basketball ecosystem. However, this created a dangerous dynamic. Instead of the league using Clark's stardom as a rising tide to lift all boats and permanently capture new fans, the interest remained intensely personalized. The audience was there for her journey, her highlights, and her games. When her season ended, so did the engagement for a massive portion of that new audience. This isn't necessarily the fault of the fans, but rather an indication that the league itself failed to provide compelling reasons for these newcomers to stay invested in the broader narrative of the season. The product beyond Caitlin Clark wasn't marketed with the same urgency or creativity, leaving the finals feeling like a separate, less important event once she was no longer in the picture. What makes the situation particularly damaging is how league leadership responded to the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. While fans and analysts were clearly seeing her transformative impact, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert seemed to be operating in an alternate reality. In an article published in the Harvard Business Review, she outlined her 3 pillars to the WNBA's success, focusing almost entirely on business strategies, vision, and transformative steps during her tenure. There was virtually no mention of Caitlin Clark's impact or that of other emerging stars who were objectively driving ticket sales and viewership. The article wasn't received favorably by critics, with satirist Ben Daniel discussing the apparent sidelining of Clark on his podcast and calling the commissioner's approach sad. This created a perception that league leadership was either completely out of touch with what was actually driving interest in their product, or worse, intentionally downplaying individual stars' contributions to maintain a narrative about systemic growth. Meanwhile, players like Aya Wilson, a 4-time WNBA MVP, couldn't even get tickets to move above the $50 mark for the most important games of the season, creating an awkward disconnect between the product on the court and the business operations running the league. This disconnect manifested in several other missteps that alienated portions of the fan base. Many observers felt the league was slow to protect and promote its most valuable asset. The narrative surrounding Clark was often dominated by controversy, from hard fouls that some argue were excessive to public criticisms from veteran players. The league's officiating and public relations response was frequently perceived as inconsistent, leaving many new fans with a sour taste. Instead of a unified front celebrating a surge in popularity, the public discourse sometimes felt fractured, with an us versus a mentality that marginalized Clark supporters. Furthermore, the commissioner's focus on long-term business pillars, while important, seemed tone-deaf when immediate, star-driven opportunity was slipping away. It felt like the league was prioritizing the appearance of corporate stability over the raw, emotional connection that sports fandom is built upon. By failing to fully embrace and harness the lightning-in-a-bottle energy that Clark provided, leadership missed a golden opportunity to convert her momentary spotlight into lasting luminescence for the entire league, ultimately failing to build a bridge between her massive fan base and the other incredible athletes in the WNBA. The matchup itself didn't help matters. The Las Vegas Aces vs. Phoenix Mercury series lacked the compelling storylines that attract casual fans. There was no Caitlin Clark, no Angel Reese, no viral drama or trash talk to keep people invested beyond the hardcore basketball audience. It was simply two teams playing good basketball in front of half-empty stands. The Aces have been absolutely dominant, finishing the regular season on a 16-game winning streak. Aya Wilson was putting up legitimate superstar numbers, and players like Chelsea Gray and Kelsey Plum were true Showtime players. The Mercury had clawed their way back into relevance, defeating both 2024 finals teams en route to a surprising playoff run. On paper, this should have been an intriguing matchup, but basketball purists alone can't fill arenas. You need casual fans to create real momentum, and casual fans tune in for personalities, narratives, and drama, not just quality basketball. The league had effectively trained its audience to care more about controversy and individual stars than the actual game, and now they were facing the consequences of that dynamic in their most important series of the year. Modern sports consumption is driven by narratives, and the Aces Mercury series offered little for the casual viewer to latch onto. There was no bitter rivalry, no historical baggage, no clear hero versus villain dynamic. The Aces were a dominant dynasty, which can be compelling, but without a formidable and hated challenger, their success can feel inevitable and therefore less interesting. The Mercury were a feel-good comeback story, but their journey lacked a singular, charismatic star power to make it resonate on a national scale. The league's marketing struggled to manufacture a compelling conflict. Was it about Diana Taurasi's legacy? The Aces seeking redemption? Without a central, easy-to-understand storyline, the finals became just another series of games. In an attention economy saturated with entertainment options, just good basketball isn't always enough to win the night. The WNBA's regular season had been fueled by personal rivalries and rookie narratives, but the finals presented a matchup that existed outside of those juicy storylines. This void exposed a critical weakness in the league's ability to build up its teams and players in a way that makes them compelling to a national audience, even in the absence of its most famous rookie. The implications of this ticket price collapse extend far beyond one disappointing final series. The WNBA is heading into critical collective bargaining agreement negotiations where players rightfully want higher salaries, bigger revenue shares, and more benefits. But how can players effectively argue for a larger piece of the revenue pie when the league's championship games can't even command more than $25 per ticket? Owners and networks will undoubtedly use these numbers as ammunition against significant salary increases, pointing to the lack of fan interest when certain individual players aren't involved. This creates a vicious cycle. Low ticket revenue leads to lower player compensation, which makes it harder to retain top talent, which further diminishes the product appeal. The league had a once-in-a-generation opportunity to lock in new fans brought in by Caitlin Clark's unprecedented popularity. All they needed to do was keep those fans entertained and make them feel valued even when Clark wasn't on the floor. Instead, many of her supporters felt alienated by how the league treated her, from the fouls that went uncalled to criticism she received from established players. Every time Clark was fouled, ignored, or criticized, her fans noticed. Every time other players mocked her success, those same fans tuned out. Now that the Caitlin Clark bump has disappeared from the finals, the numbers are crashing straight back to reality. This financial reality check could have long-term consequences for the league's growth and stability. Sponsors and media partners pay for eyes and engagement. When they see half-empty arenas for the championship and ticket prices that suggest low demand, it undermines the league's argument for increased value in the next round of TV rights deals and corporate partnerships. Why should a company pay top dollar for an ad buy if the audience evaporates for the most important games? Furthermore, the inability to monetize the finals effectively hurts the league's argument for expansion. Potential ownership groups in new cities will look at the finals attendance and revenue and question the viability of the investment. The players, who are the heart and soul of the product, are caught in the middle. They are performing at an elite level, but the business side is failing to capitalize on their talents in a consistent way. This disconnect between on-court product and off-court revenue generation creates friction and frustration, making it difficult to build a sustainable model where the best athletes in the world are compensated fairly, which is ultimately what is required for the league to thrive long-term. The optics of the entire situation were brutal for the league. Social media was flooded with screenshots of ticket maps showing hundreds, sometimes thousands of unsold seats in every single section. The silence in the arena was louder than the officiating whistles that had caused so much controversy throughout the season. ESPN's coverage felt half-hearted, with awkward crowd shots showing rows of empty chairs directly behind the broadcast booth that completely killed the energy on television. For a league that constantly talked about momentum, this finals felt like someone had slammed on the brakes right before the finish line. Commissioner Engelbert continued giving press conferences talking about record growth, expanding the game, and the league being in the strongest position it's ever been, all while fans couldn't be bothered to show up for $30 tickets to the championship. If you're going to claim historic success, you need to be ready to back it up with actual butts in seats, not just social media hashtags and corporate partnership announcements. The disconnect between the league's narrative and the visual evidence of empty arenas was too significant for even the most casual observers to ignore. The public relations nightmare was compounded by the schadenfreude from critics who have long questioned the WNBA's viability. The low ticket prices and empty seats became a talking point for those eager to dismiss the league altogether. This external criticism, combined with the internal frustration from fans, created a perfect storm of negative press. Every post about an empty arena was retweeted with mocking commentary, and every statement from the league about growth was met with cynical replies pointing to the finals attendance. This environment makes it incredibly difficult to attract a neutral or skeptical fan. First impressions matter, and a casual viewer flipping on the finals and seeing a lifeless crowd might not give the product a second chance, regardless of how incredible the athleticism on display may be. The league's failure to create a sold-out, energetic championship event, the one thing that should be easiest to market, did more damage to its public perception than any critic ever could. It handed its detractors all the evidence they needed and put its defenders in an impossible position, having to argue against the plain sight of empty chairs. What's particularly telling is that this wasn't an issue of the economy or disposable income. The same fans who were happily paying hundreds of dollars for concert tickets, UFC fights, or college football games were actively choosing to skip the WNBA finals despite the bargain basement pricing. This wasn't a pricing issue. It was an interest issue. When people aren't willing to spend $30 to watch your championship live, that's a relevance problem that no marketing campaign can solve. The league had all the ingredients for a strong final season, a growing fan base, national attention, new sponsors, and one of the most talked about players in all of sports. But they somehow managed to turn all that incredible momentum into $25 tickets. It's almost impressive in its own twisted way. For months, the WNBA's leadership had been patting themselves on the back, acting like they had cracked the code to women's basketball. Every press conference sounded exactly the same. The numbers are up, the brand is strong, we're growing faster than ever. But behind all the corporate slogans, the actual product experience didn't change significantly. The same limited marketing approaches, the same officiating complaints, the same broadcast presentation. They just assumed that pure hype alone could carry the finals without addressing the underlying issues that prevent casual fans from becoming dedicated ones. The core problem is that fandom requires more than just appreciation for good play. It requires emotional investment. People become lifelong fans of teams and leagues through shared experiences, iconic moments, and a sense of connection. The WNBA, in its crucial finals moment, failed to create that sense of must-see event television. The conversation around the league was often about everything except the basketball, the controversies, the politics, the business metrics. The solution isn't to simply hope for another Caitlin Clark every year. It's to undertake the hard work of building deep, emotional connections with a broad audience. This means better storytelling around all its stars, creating more accessible and engaging broadcast productions, and fostering rivalries that capture the public's imagination. It requires an honest assessment of why the product isn't connecting at the level it should be, and a willingness to make bold changes. Until the league moves beyond celebrating surface-level metrics and addresses this fundamental relevance gap, it risks seeing history repeat itself, where moments of breakout popularity are followed by a swift return to the struggle for mainstream attention. Even the players seemed aware of the problem. Stars across the league had taken turns calling out the leadership, yet instead of implementing meaningful changes, the commissioner kept holding listening sessions and forming task forces. Because nothing solves a relevance crisis like another committee meeting. The undeniable truth that everyone is afraid to say out loud is that fans came for Caitlin Clark, not for the WNBA. That's the uncomfortable reality that the league needs to confront head-on. Without her magnetic presence, there was no spark, no drama, no one pulling in millions of viewers who wouldn't otherwise be tuning in. The finals should feel like the peak of the season, not the hangover after the party. The marketing team scrambled to post highlights, push new storylines, and flood social media with empowerment hashtags. But it was too little, too late. You can't hashtag your way out of empty seats. The league's attempt to spin the cheap tickets as making the finals accessible for all fans came across as exactly what it was: damage control for a product that people simply weren't buying at any price point. True accessibility happens when you sell out and open more seats, not when you slash prices by 70% because no one's buying. But the player frustration wasn't just a vague sentiment. It was becoming increasingly public and specific. All-star forward Nafisa Collier of the Minnesota Lynx has been particularly vocal, stating bluntly that the league's marketing efforts were falling short and that stars weren't being promoted effectively. She pointed out the glaring disparity between the massive attention on one rookie and the struggle for other elite veterans to gain mainstream recognition. This wasn't about jealousy. It was a legitimate business concern from a player who understands that the league's financial health, and by extension her own paycheck, depends on building a stable of recognizable stars. Io Wilson, the face of the champion Aces, has also spoken about the need for the league to better capitalize on moments of heightened attention, implying that opportunities were being missed. When your most decorated active player is suggesting the league isn't seizing the moment, it's a 5-alarm fire. These aren't outsiders criticizing the product. These are the very athletes whose talents are the foundation of the entire enterprise. They see the empty seats from the court. They feel the lack of energy in the arena during the most important games of their lives. Their comments reveal a deep-seated fear that the league's leadership is managing a decline rather than orchestrating a revolution. The reliance on task forces and listening tours, while perhaps well-intentioned, has become a symbol of bureaucratic inertia. In the fast-paced world of professional sports, where narratives change by the minute, the league's response often feels agonizingly slow and corporate. A listening session doesn't create a viral marketing campaign. A committee report doesn't fill a seat tomorrow. This approach suggests a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. The issue isn't a lack of data or ideas. The players and fans are screaming solutions. The issue is a lack of decisive action and creative execution. While the league office was presumably drafting agendas and compiling reports, the cultural moment was passing them by. The conversation had moved on, and the finals became a case study in what happens when administration is prioritized over inspiration. This creates a deep trust deficit between the players and the league office. When athletes see their valid concerns met with the formation of yet another committee, it signals that their voices are being heard, but not truly listened to. It fosters perception that the leadership is more comfortable with the process of solving problems than with actually solving them, a dangerous dynamic for any organization, but especially one in a competitive entertainment landscape. This leads to the heart of the issue, the difference between temporary buzz and sustainable fandom. The league experienced a seismic, Caitlin Clark-shaped jolt of energy, but it failed to build the infrastructure to channel that energy into lasting support. Social media hashtags and empowerment messages are fine for reinforcing the beliefs of existing fans, but they do very little to convert casual observers into dedicated followers. True fandom is built on a foundation of compelling competition, easy-to-understand narratives, and a sense of shared identity. The WNBA's marketing, in its final hour, felt generic. It appealed to a sense of duty rather than a sense of excitement. It asked people to support women's sports instead of giving them an irresistible reason to watch this incredible game tonight. The latter creates fans. The former creates obligators, and obligation is a weak substitute for genuine passion. People don't wear the jersey of a team they feel morally obligated to watch. They wear the jersey of a team they love. The flawed logic of accessibility through price slashing ultimately exposes a painful truth about perceived value. In the consumer's mind, price is often directly linked to quality. When a league dramatically reduces the cost of its premier product, it sends an unintended message about that product's worth. It screams desperation rather than opportunity. Think about the most exclusive must-see events: the Super Bowl, a major concert, a Broadway smash. Their high price is part of their allure. It signals that you are experiencing something rare and valuable. By making finals tickets practically free, the WNBA inadvertently told the public that its championship was a low-stakes, low-value event. True accessibility isn't about cheap tickets. It's about making your product so culturally indispensable that people are willing to make financial sacrifices to be a part of it. It's about creating a demand so strong that the league can confidently set a fair price and know that fans will see the value. The empty arenas and discounted tickets weren't a noble gesture of inclusion. They were the undeniable result of failure to create that kind of indispensable, must-see product for anyone beyond the most hardcore core of its audience. The challenge now is whether the league can learn this brutal lesson and fundamentally rethink how it builds value, not just how it manages a crisis. Looking toward the future, the WNBA finds itself at a critical crossroads. They had a generational talent who brought unprecedented attention to the league. But instead of fully embracing and nurturing that interest, they allowed narratives to develop that alienated her fan base. They had a season of record-breaking storylines, but couldn't translate that into compelling championship narratives. They have incredible athletes putting on spectacular displays of basketball, but can't convince people to pay more than $25 to watch the most important games of a year. The solution isn't another corporate initiative or marketing campaign. It's about fundamentally understanding what drives fan engagement and building from there. Stars drive interest. Rivalries create drama, and consistent storytelling builds investment. The league needs to stop pretending that business metrics equal cultural relevance and start addressing why, after all these years of growing the game, fans still aren't showing up when it matters most. The $25 finals ticket isn't just a pricing failure. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem that the WNBA desperately needs to solve before the next Caitlin Clark comes along and decides to take her talent elsewhere. If you made it to the end of this analysis, you clearly care about the business of sports. So let us know in the comments what you think the WNBA's biggest misstep has been. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that goes beyond the headlines and into what's really happening in the world of sports.